This is an old map showing California on the west side of America to be on its own. Now I have a theory on what joins it to the mainland of America. But first let's watch Static in the Attic explanation for cannabis sea disappearing.
Last week or so, there's been a series of 7.0 or greater magnitude earthquakes. I know Taiwan had a major one the other day, Mexico yesterday or today. And, it's been looking to me for years now that we're going into one of those cycles of history that I've shown all kinds of firsthand accounts from the past of these cycles where the weather gets all crazy, the jet streams go out of whack, you have severe drought in some areas, you have severe flooding, and you have major earthquakes. And I don't think these little 7.0 or earthquakes are anywhere close to the scale of what has happened in our past, to where when you look into folklore of cultures all around the world and mythology that say things like that used to be flat plains out there and now it's a range of mountains. I mean, that scale of just awesome power. I've read firsthand accounts of the last majorly destructive event in the neighborhood 500 to 700 years ago. They've officially got it dated at 1300s. And they say things to the effect of mountains fell in, new lakes were formed, cities were swallowed up, great chasms opened up, and a foul odor came forth that if anybody smelled it, they were dead in 24 hours. These death and rebirth phoenix cycles, for lack of a better term, you can call it grand solar minimum, you can call it, which has problems with that because we have double the sunspot count that we should right now. Some would say it's the pole shift. I don't know the mechanism, but you call it whatever you want. It's a fact, though, that we have these cyclical disaster periods. See my playlists if this is a brand new subject to you. I've done a lot of very extensive research into this subject. But since these big seismic events have been happening, I was watching Dutch Sense, and he mentioned the inland sea, Lake Cannabis, that used to be in America that gave out and flooded the whole Grand Canyon, formed the Grand Canyon. And then he says that there's 300-mile star forts out there. We'll talk about that later. But in the very first video that I did 3 years ago, I saw something that everybody else was missing. I saw a couple people looking at the idea of the old island of California, and they were showing this map here and ignoring the fact that there was this big, huge lake inland sea over here. And when I saw that, I know that these maps are to scale. At that scale, you're talking about a couple 100-mile long lake, an inland sea. I called it a Death Star at the time in my first video. That's no moon, because if there was, in fact, a 200-mile lake up there that gave out, it actually makes a lot of things make a lot of sense, like where the Petrified National Forest is in the American Southwest, the Grand Canyon, everything, the Green River Valley, and even the idea that California was actually an island back then, and then modern day Arizona and all of that desert land out there is a wash. It's a scarred, stripped landscape. And then you have all of the cliff dwellings out there from the refugees of this catastrophe, which I'll get into in a minute. And then by 2 years ago, I had found the geological proof that the lake was exactly where I said it was in my first video, and that I've got the geological paperwork to back up my whole claim here. But let me show you what's going on here. This all makes perfect sense. In all of the earliest maps of America, they show California as an island, and then they show this big, huge inland sea up here, and then the Great North River flowing down to about where modern day Tijuana would be. And you can see from all of the maps, it shows that it's up in the mountains. And if you know the geography of the American West, then you know you're either in the high, Rocky Mountains or the high desert there. And looking at the big picture here, you see that either there was a Great North River and this big, huge, I'm just going to call it Lake Cannabis. That's what most maps call it. But it was either still there at the time of the maps, or they thought that it was still there. Because here's the deal. If you're down at the delta of the Great North River, which is modern day Salton Sea area, you are 800 to 1,000 miles away from where that lake is, way up there in the mountains. And, let's just say that the lake was there for thousands of years, and then there was a great catastrophe, and the sides of the mountains fell out, and it drained off all over the place. The people down at the end of the river, they might notice a change in the river, but they still don't know what happened up at that lake that's been there for thousands of years, so they're just going to assume that it's still there. So first, let me show you exactly where that lake is. So the latitude is spot on. We use a different prime meridian now, so the longitudes may be in question, but as far as the latitude goes, all the maps have latitude lines. The equator's where the equator was, the Tropic of Cancer where's on, so forth. But all the maps show it at the exact same latitude. This may be a little hard for you to read, cock your head to the left a little bit, but that is the 40 degrees latitude mark up in the corner of the map. So this is the 40 degree latitude line, and you see that the lake is at like 41 to 43 degrees of latitude. On another map here, you see it right about 40 degrees going up to 42 and a half. But all the maps put it right at that general area. And even if you look at the shape of the lake itself, it's got kind of a little mitten shape to it. This fits in exactly perfect with this area on the map right here. Here is your mitten-shaped lake. And then the Great North River flowed down through what's modern day the Green River Valley, and down below is the Grand Canyon that got dug out with all the water that flowed out. And I've got the geological paper saying that there was, of course, they say it was hundreds of millions of years ago. No, it was 500 to 700 years ago. There was a big inland sea. There was a mountain wall right here, here, and here that held all of the water in, and those all gave out. Right here at the south end, you have what's called the Gates of Lodore. It's this massive rift where the mountains were tore apart, an awesome rafting area that you have to drive like 5 hours across this dried out lake bed. And when I was there, I was up in it was before I ever knew anything about all of this, but I'm driving across there going, wow, this is a big, huge alluvial plain, empty lake bed up in the mountains here. And then you get down to the end and you have this huge rift in the mountains that begins the Green River Valley wash area. Here's the geological survey proving that there was a lake there. Don't berate me for not sharing my sources when I'm showing the name of the whole article right on the screen. If you want to look this up, there's the title, type it in. But in this paper, they discussed the fact that there were several, it varied in size from a huge lake to, they say that it was smaller at times. We'll look at this side by side with the Wind River Mountains here in a minute and the enormous size of this lake. But there it is. There's the geological proof that there was a lake up there. And in this study, they say that the boundary can be explained by tectonic reorganization of the Lake Gasuot drainage basin in response to a renewed uplift of the southern Wind River Mountains. It's just a fancy way of saying there's a big earthquake there and an uplift. Looking at these side by side, the red lines here is the Wind River Mountains that juts down, and that's what gave it that mitten-looking shape. And now look at the size of this thing. We're talking about 200 miles of water up in the mountains and a big old inland sea. Doing a little Google Earth tour of this is what it looks like to me. And keep in mind, a seismic event of this side, the ground is going to turn into basically liquid concrete. It's going to be a flowing river of mud. But it looks like to the east, all of this got washed out, probably formed the Missouri River basin. That river has flipped and snaked and changed course for the last 200 years. It's been the hardest river for the Corps of Engineers to try to get under control. Now, to the west, it looks to me like the whole western slope of the Rockies fell off and filled in what used to be the old Strait of California, and formed the state of Nevada. And this is, all of just the absolute wastelands of the American Southwest. Just to the south of where the gates of Lador here is actually where you find Dinosaur National Park. And I'll get into that subject in another video. But this is the Green River Valley. It's where you find Arches National Park. It's where the Grand Canyon is. And all of this, in my opinion, it was very clearly formed with water. Also, if you keep going with this idea, all of this mud flood of material flowed down off of the higher mountains in the east towards the west, and when it hits the Sierra Nevada, it gets jammed up and pours out right here through Los Angeles. So right above the Cajon Pass there, that's where the high desert starts, all of the wastelands. And then you have a very different biological diversity over in the California Valley over there. I can also show you another really cool spot that I found down here in the desert that is obvious carnage. This is part of that wasteland east of Los Angeles, but you have about 75 to 100 feet of, this is all river rock, obviously worn smooth and rounded river rock. And on top of that, then you have another 50 to 75 feet of sandstone and sedentary, I can't say that right now, sedimentary rock on top of the river rock below. So that all had to have been deposited there, obviously, after the river rock was already in place. And when you look at that on an aerial, it looks like there was a big, huge body of water there that gave out and washed out so that we're able to see those layers. Everything for miles around there is just flat desert. Right here, you're able to see down into what's below the surface level. It's just all rolling desert hills up there on top of this cliff here. Also in the Green River Valley, Arches National Park, where you have all these crazy rock formations that they tell you this took billions and billions of years of wind erosion, blah, blah, blah. The official science of geology, 150 years ago or whatever, James Cuvier, catastrophism versus uniformitarianism, where I lean towards catastrophism, where all of this stuff was created by huge events and happened in a short period of time, where they teach that everything happens very slowly over millions of years. That's uniformitarianism, which was, I believe Charles Hutton was his name, and he was a free bricklayer. But if you look at Lake Powell right now and the water level is dropping down, you see that all this stuff was formed underwater. What it looks like to me with most of these is, like here, there was a rock or a tree stump or something sitting up here that was weighting down the mud and sand, and it became sandstone while the water washed everything out around it. This area is also where you find the petrified forest, and what I would say is that there were a bunch of ancient trees down in that lake up there in the river that wood doesn't really decay underwater, so it probably sat there and soaked up all kinds of minerals. And then after the event happened, they all got sunbaked out in the desert. It's got, the conditions have to be just right to even get a petrified tree. You're never going to find a petrified tree anywhere that you have a deciduous forest. Anyway, when you look at the big picture of all this, it all makes perfect sense to me. It's not something that takes a 4-year degree or a 4-hour YouTube video. if you just look at the evidence that is there, then it leads you to these conclusions. And, there's more to it. I don't feel like keeping going on this one. But all of the cliff dwellings are out there, and it fits in perfect that those were the survivor communities of this huge catastrophe. And I guess really the next logical conclusion would be that there was a star fort there, and a small earthquake kind of tweaked it about a degree out of alignment to true north, which set off the free energy machine that caused the huge catastrophe and reset. But instead of like today, where the people in power would take all of the best military jets and helicopters and everything like that, and all the munitions and everything, and they would take all of that technology to absolutely dominate all of the people that were kind of the refugees of a catastrophe. But instead, what they decided to do was just act like they never had any technology, and they invented, steam engine, and they used steam for 100 years to throw everybody off of their free energy stuff that they're hiding, that they still haven't broke out yet to this day. But I'm sure everybody else already had that figured out and was there. Laters.
On all these old maps, you'll notice that there is no land above that's connecting that land to the mainland of America, and I believe it was a Phoenix event that connected the lands together. In the vapor canopy, animals grow to enormous sizes.
Fact that for a period of 1656 years in antiquity, the world was covered in a vapor canopy from 3895 to 2239 BC, when the mesosphere collapsed, causing the disaster recorded in history as the Great Deluge. 21 years later, Joseph Dillow in The Waters Above, Earth's Pre-Flood Vapor Canopy. This book was published in 1982. Dillow lists a number of traditional accounts that demonstrate a memory of the canopy. The effects of the canopy is no longer theoretical. Creationist scientists in Glen Rose, Texas have built a hyperbaric biosphere, a chamber where they replicated the canopy conditions, and the result was much larger plant life forms inside this containment field. The lifespan of fruit flies was tripled, and similar organisms underwent changes. They have used this biosphere to increase the size of fruit flies, other insects, and plants that grew to astonishing dimensions inside this replicated vapor canopy condition.
Astonishing sizes. This will blow your mind on how big animals grew in the vapor canopy.
And if you doubt that this is a dragon, this is his scales and his throat. And you have to Google Earth. So it's time everybody goes up and does a little investigation on their own rather than just paying attention to, little clip here and clip there, because there's a lot to learn about this. I paid real close attention to this, trust me. This is all run off from this creature. This is his throat. It's all the scales run all the way up and down his throat, all the way into his gut. Now, is that where the heart is? I don't know where they are in a dragon or in a bird either, because this is an avian creature. It has a cloaca right here at the end between where the butt is and the tail comes, where just about everybody's poops right there. And that's where the poop is, because that's where they're growing stuff, because that's where the biology ran out here, right out there. And this is a cloaca. Two systems dumped together. You got the feces and the, urine type stuff. And that came right out right there. That's where it would be located, and that's where it is. And the tail keeps going down here, and the scales are, the dragon tail scales are still here. And this is transition metals running off, because they're different metal plates. You see the different metals? Those are metals. You see them? Look at it. It's just phenomenal what this is here. This is not just hills and valleys. And that thing goes all the way across North Africa, and it was trying to kill this fish. And remember I talked about blood vessels? Look at this. When he spit this stuff out, which is developed through this yellow stuff comes up right out of his gut. And that's what creates the toxins, and they flow right down out of his whiskers. You see the whiskers here? They all have these whiskers. You see them? Look at that. You see this one? They all have those whiskers, and out of that whiskers flowed all of that stuff. And it went down to attack the fish. And that's the fin of the fish. And this is the actual vital flesh that it ate into, and we can see all the blood vessels. You see all those blood vessels? Those are blood vessels. Main artery type things brought in good fresh blood, and then they ran to all these little things over here to every single cell. You would never see this except that the toxins ate away all of the superficial surface stuff and were right down into the flesh. Isn't that elegant? Look at that. Now, so that's the flesh below the surface, which would basically be like our skin. It'd be looking under this, removing all the skin and the interstitium, they call it, and we'd be right down to where the flesh is being nourished by the blood vessels. Right? Now, if we go just a little further where the toxin did not hit, you see right here? If we did, there's the transition zone right there between where it hit and where it didn't hit. There's a little tiny bit of overlap, but not much. And then we get into nice flesh that has not been eroded, and we really can't see through it the way we could see through the other stuff. All right, it just looks like who knows what. But the other stuff, all of this is gone. And because of that, we can see what its fleshy nature was. And again, there it is. It's just undeniable to somebody that understands biology. And I can imagine that there's going to be some kind of interesting chemistry in these arteries. And you'll find different colors in here because of the transition metals. Anyway, and this is the giant fish. Now, I can't account for their sizes. All I can tell you is that there was history written about this, and we should understand this because, you know,
This is the reason why I really wanted to show this, because the size of that fish, there's only one place where the water is deep enough for it to swim, and that would be above the firmament in the deep. And I believe it fell through the Earth's magnetic field when they collapsed it on a reset.
I don't know where they came from. All I know is in the ancient texts, Tiamat, who was supposed to be Mother Earth, created monsters to fight for her. And they're everywhere. I mean, this is only one, and that isn't even as big as they get. They get bigger, and they're all over the earth. The East Coast is a dragon. The West Coast is a dragon, Scorpzilla. The East Coast is Quetzalcoatl. And you think I'm kidding? Roger does not kid about dragons. There he is right there. It goes all the way up the East Coast. That is Quetzalcoatl. You see that? And here's his beard right here. You see the beard? The difference in colors is due to the difference in chemistry. The difference in chemistry is due to the difference in the body. The body is here. And there's his little bumpy nose. Oh, that little bumpy nose. And then it comes up here. There's his beard. And it snakes right around, coming off his head up in Little Rock. You see this right here? That's the feathers. They call them the plumed serpent. Here's the feathers. If you go right down and look at them, you can see their feathers. And I'll show you the rest of the feathers. And that's why they're so green, because they're made out of collagens. Collagens grow really good green stuff and flesh. It makes very good green stuff. And so here's his head, goes all the way around, all the way up the East Coast, all the way up. And here's the feathers that are up here. You see, those are feathers. Oh, just hills that got bumped in the tectonic plate, this and that. No, those are feathers, my friend. And they come all the way up the East Coast. That is a big dragon. And then there's another one over here, Scorpzilla, which is even bigger. I just did a video on this. There's his Scorpzilla tail. There's his injector. It squirted out when he died, apparently, and just made this blob here. You see it? And that is an articulating Scorpzilla scorpion injector. That's why these wrinkles here. This can go back like this, and then, and his tail comes around and makes a clamp to do his injecting in. Only there was nothing in the middle. Normally he would inject it into something, and we would have scorpulization. Now, where does his head end up? It is California. He said, oh, come on, Roger. I said, oh, no. There it is right there. There's his eyeball. And again, I'm sure we could probably find a beard. I didn't really look too hard. But maybe he doesn't have a beard. I don't know. But I can tell you what, that's a dragon.
And this is what I believe connected the island to the mainland of America, the Phoenix event. Something that large has come from the waters above and fallen to the earth.
And it follows all the way up. This is his shoulder right here. This is the neck. And again, the colors are from, the colors of the vegetation are from the type of body tissue. And then over here in Fox, Alaska, was where this digestive system, and that was the one I did about physics girl. She went up there, and they were literally in the rectum of this gigantic creature, in one of its digestive system areas. It's a huge tunnel, and it goes all over the place up in here. And it smells exactly like dog poop. We got a lot of thinking to do.
That was Roger from Mud Fossil University, and he has a lot more to show, so check his channel out. Now, the devastation something that big falling on Earth would cause is mega. An animal that size landing in the sea would have caused giant tidal waves all over the Earth. When the seas calm down, the next disasters would be volcanoes and earthquakes from mass weight moving, creating different pressures in different areas of the tectonic plates, and this would have caused Lake Cannabis to run off, creating the Grand Canyons. The vapour canopy allowed animals to grow big because of the different pressures. Well, who knows what pressures are like above the firmament? The conditions could be such to allow for such an animal to grow thousands of miles in length. So when the Earth's field has been weakened enough, one of these animals could fall through. Yes, I know how crazy I sound, but we do live in a simulation, and that can make this possible. Anyway, this is just a far out theory, so don't have nightmares. Hope you enjoyed, and please like, share and subscribe. And I will put the links to the other channels below in the description box. This world is stranger than fiction.